And joining us, we appreciate it because I texted him while we were already on the air for this show. Dave Zangaro checks in on the Comcast Business Hotline to talk about the Bryce Huff news from today. Dave, we appreciate the time. And what is your initial reaction to Howie Roseman getting this deal basically done?
Yeah, they're still working to finalize it, but it's not an outcome that surprises me. You know, it was just hard for me to see a scenario where Bryce Huff will be back on this team in 2025. And I know the people who thought he would be back, and I understand that thinking, was that, hey, they paid him all this money, you got to try to get something out of him. But, I mean, Vic Fangio clearly told you what he thought about Bryce Huff last year. He barely played him. It was kind of a disaster. He has that wrist injury. He gets surgery. He comes back. He's healthy for the playoffs, and then he's a healthy scratch in the Super Bowl. So I think that it just didn't work out. In hindsight, it looks like a move that was kind of a disconnect between the front office and the coaching staff about how the player would be integrated into the defensive system. And, you know, I give Howie Roseman credit for moving on. It's not an easy thing when you're a GM. You have to kind of admit the mistake publicly, and everyone knows it was a mistake. But maybe it's a little easier after you win a Super Bowl, too, that you're allowed one misstep here and there.
All right, I got to ask you, what does this do? It's a post-June 1st trade, so what does that do to the cap space?
Yeah, so in layman terms, like the reason June 1st is a big date in the NFL is because it allows you to spread out the dead cap money over 2 seasons. So anything before June 1st has to count against that current season's cap. Anything after June 1st, or if it's like a cut that gets designated as a post-June 1st cut, it basically splits it up between this year and next, and it makes it a little more palatable. The other element of this, reportedly Bryce Huff agreed to a contract restructure before this trade would go through. And basically the Eagles are taking on a big chunk of that salary, and they're splitting it with the 49ers to make this work. So basically it will free up cap space, but it's more about, you know, realizing that the player, it wasn't the right fit for the Eagles. And I think that was a part of the whole situation, too, is you bring this guy back, and he's a really situational type player. Everyone around the room is going, he's making $17 million a year, and they brought him back for that. So I think it was a situation that probably wasn't tenable.
Now, what does this leave the Eagles able to do? Not that they have much more to fill out the roster, but how much does eating this money restrict them from continuing to build towards 25-26?
Not really much at all. And they're in still a pretty healthy position in terms of cap space and resources, in terms of, you know, not only the cap space, but draft picks moving forward. So pretty healthy in terms of the roster management. And that's a credit to Howie and his staff, because they really do think long-term about all these decisions they make. So when you do have a misstep like this, it doesn't completely tank all the healthy progress you've made. So I think they're in a pretty good situation. I think the more immediate question when you look at this roster is, do they have enough at edge rusher? And you could honestly ask that question before this trade, because I don't think Bryce Huff was going to factor in to what they were going to do that much anyway. But you lost Josh Sweat in free agency. Brandon Graham retired. Now Bryce Huff isn't an option anymore. Look, they might be fine. They have Nolan Smith coming back for year 3. He was really good in year 2. Jalyx Hunt, I mean, I couldn't be higher on Jalyx Hunt and his future, but he hasn't played a lot of football yet. You bring in Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche, 2 veterans that I think have the potential to be productive, but I don't know if you can really rely on that a ton. And then we'll see, maybe Jahad Campbell factors in as an edge rusher as a rookie, maybe Antoine Powell-Ryland, the rookie 6th-round pick. But, you know, the one thing about this team when we talk about the defense is we all saw what happened in the Super Bowl, and they were dominant up front. And I think when you watch that, you might get the sense that, man, they must have been dominant all year from a pass rush standpoint. And that wasn't really the case in 2024, and the defense was obviously incredible. But I think their defense last year was really led by a fantastic linebacker in Zach Bond and a really good secondary. So I think that is one question I have about this team going forward, is do they have enough in terms of pass rushers?
Dave, what is going on with Cooper DeJean? I mean, in OTAs, I see that you were saying that he was playing some different positions.
Yeah, it's not a huge deal, but basically it comes down to this. Cooper DeJean last year only played the nickel position. He's inside when the Eagles have 5 defensive backs. The only switch up from that this year is going to be, it looks like, at least based on the OTA practice we saw this week, in their base package. So when they have 4 defensive backs on the field, he's going to play outside cornerback. And the reason you do that is because you say, well, we don't want Cooper DeJean to leave the football field. He's that good. And as long as he can handle that, and it's not going to be a ton, he played around 85% of the snaps last season once he got into the starting lineup. So we're talking about another 15% bump, and even less once they got into the playoffs. They were living in nickel pretty much the whole time. So it'll be a little bit more on his plate. It's something I think he can handle. And basically it comes down to, who would you rather have play 100% of the snaps, Cooper DeJean or whoever wins that battle between Keely Ringo and Adoree Jackson? And I think the pretty obvious answer is Cooper DeJean.
We're talking to Dave Zangaro of NBC Sports Philadelphia. Now, Dave, we haven't talked to you since Kevin Patullo met with the media. What were your first impressions of his first media availability as Eagles OC?
From a selfish standpoint, I think he's going to give us a little bit more than some of the other OCs we've had in recent history in terms of what he'll say at press conferences. So that's my very selfish take on it. But aside from that, he talked about some of his influences as a coach, and obviously Nick Sirianni is one of the big ones. And I asked him, how he differs from Sirianni, because right or wrong, fair or not fair, he's been linked so closely to Nick because they've worked together for so long, because he flew in on the jet with Nick when he took the job back in 2021. And he admitted that, yes, like they do see things similarly a lot, but they also think differently on some things. And I'm curious to see if that manifests, because, look, I don't expect the Eagles offense to look completely different this year. I think that would be foolish if we thought all of a sudden they're going to start doing things they've never done before. But in terms of, will Kevin Patullo bring some new ideas? I don't know, but his relationship with Nick Sirianni might let him feel free enough to bring up those ideas where some other coaches haven't. I'm kind of curious to see how that looks. But like I said, I really don't think the offense is all of a sudden going to look completely different in 2025.
All right, Jahad Campbell had shoulder surgery a few months ago. What do you look for him to? What do you look for him to be defensively?
Yeah, it's a good question, because right now him and Nakobe Dean are sidelined. They were both watching practice earlier this week. I think it's kind of like we'll see which one of those guys comes back first. My guess would be Jahad Campbell, because we know the significance of that patellar tendon tear that Nakobe Dean suffered. I think early on he's going to be an inside linebacker, off-ball linebacker. It's what he played mostly in college, and even though he has the ability to play on the edge, and I think that eventually he could factor in there, you got to start him somewhere. He's got to be in a position room. It seems like you go back to rookie camp, he was kind of hanging around the linebackers. He's been hanging around Nakobe Dean a lot. Him and Bobby King took in some of the practice on Wednesday together. Bobby King's their inside linebackers coach. So I think that's going to be his position early on. And if Nakobe Dean isn't ready for the season, and as long as Jahad Campbell can practice in training camp, I think he has a good chance to be the starter next to Zach Ball to open the season.
So you don't think it's going to be like a Micah Parsons thing where he's moving around all the time?
No, I don't think right away. And I think that they like the upside he brings as an edge rusher, as a pass rusher. And I think that, the intriguing thing to me is what happens when all of those three players are healthy, if that happens, right? If you have Zach Bond, Nakobe Dean, and Jahad Campbell, I mean, that opens up some intriguing possibilities if you're Vic Fangio. You can give some different looks. You can have those three on the field. You can walk up Jahad Campbell to the line, or you can walk up Zach Bond to the line and let them rush. So I think that eventually we will see that stuff. But, when you're talking about a rookie, you don't just give them the plate with all the food on it at once. You give it to them in bits and pieces. You let them understand it a little bit. And because he hasn't even been able to practice yet, I don't think they're going to dump it all on him immediately.
Well, Dave, we appreciate the time, even though we dumped this interview on you as soon as the Bryce Huff information came down. So thank you for being flexible, and we appreciate you joining us as always.
Of course, guys. Take care.
There he is, Dave Zangaro of NBC Sports Philadelphia on the Comcast Business Hotline. Always appreciate him taking the time.
Hey, I want to thank you guys for watching, listening in. I want you to like, subscribe, do what you have to do to kind of stay on focus with us. Also, we also have plenty of other content that goes on here on YouTube. So go to that, like that, subscribe to that. And also you can catch us on the afternoon show 2 to 6, Monday through Friday, 97.5 The Fanatic, 97.5thefanatic.com, and NBC Sports Philadelphia.
Hey everybody, it's Bill Colarulo. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. Make sure you like and subscribe to our channel so you can engage during the show, and you're not going to want to miss all the content that we post. It's not only the live videos, it's videos after the fact. It's our shorts. It's all the content you want as a Philadelphia sports fan. Looking forward to connecting.